Welcome back to another episode of the MSP Cyber Roundtable. Uh, we're short one guest who just disappeared, but the three of us here today are going to be talking about co-managed security best practices. Um, Kyle, since since Frank's taking a time out here, we're going to start with you. Before we get into topic of the day, I really love to just take a chance to introduce the personalities, right, that our service provider partners are going to be working with, right, as they implement these security solutions. Kyle, one of the things that people ask most frequently to me from our partner base that is not about the product, right, is how did you get into security? So I'm going to pose that question to you. Uh, what led you to Josys, right? Let's start like early, like maybe like pre-technology or pre-security, and like what led to your current position.
Yeah, appreciate that, Matt. Kyle, Josys here. U.S. partnerships. So when I graduated college, all I knew is that I wanted to get into tech. Born and raised in Seattle, so I've always been around it. And I started in sales at a startup back in 2018. Just kind of trying to get a sense of the landscape, and did that for about 3 years. Moved to one different company, moved into a full cycle role. And then eventually, it was HR tech, and then eventually moved into a product management position at a fintech for payments. Did that for about 3 years, and then kind of decided that there were pieces of both kind of roles that I liked, and figured I could get the sort of best of both worlds in a partnerships role. And the reason I specifically kind of decided on IT security is just because it's not going away, right? And especially with AI really proliferating in the last few years, it's only going to get more important. And I also just find it fascinating. I do a lot of self-guided education before I jumped into the role, and it got me really excited to get in. And it's been settling in for about 3 or 4 months now, and I've enjoyed it. So it's really just been kind of like I found my way in, and I like it so far.
I think you're right that it's not going anywhere. We were actually, there was a moment in late COVID years where it was really interesting for the first time, like for forever, right? Some of the loss numbers were like trending, like maybe we had our grasp on these things, right? Like we had increased security spending during COVID, a lot of new solutions. The world was coming to grips with that. And and then AI, right? And then AI, and like totally out of control again, right? And our so we're still playing catch up basically as a security industry. The HR background is actually really interesting to me because it's actually one of the front lines right now in the security industry, is really getting closer to the identity, to the person. And there's this big trend towards HR outsourcing. But one of the things that's enabled is all these really neat integrations into the security landscape, in terms of, hey, this person like not a North Korean fake person, right? That I'm hiring over camera that I've never met in person. There's all sorts of opportunities there for to really take what was an informal HR practice and make it just as structured, just as methodical as other areas of systems control. So I'm sure that background's useful.
Well, you can also see some of the big payroll guys in enterprise, the Workdays and the Salesforce.
Oh yeah,
the way that they're adding in AI elements and just changing that whole structure. And again, our part of our business is looking at services and penetration testing, and that becomes even more super critical from that validation, because once you get into one spot, if you're getting that customer, the personnel information and individuals, then man, oh man, there's all kinds of trouble to be had.
So, Frank, you've told your career story a couple times. Why don't you tell a story about this year?
Oh, Well, this year is going to be an interesting one. I'm looking at I'm getting older, right? So there's what who knows what's going to come down the line, but I think we all look at how much we want to work and how long we want to work. So I'm let's just say I'm looking at that as a
Good for you. Good. I mean, I don't know. I know people that like they stop working. They're like, now what? I
Well,
thought this
yeah,
was
that's
going to
that's
be.
why that's why I hesitate. I kind of say what the plans are ahead because I know they'll change and they'll be flexible and I still enjoy being around people like you guys, right, and others in this channel and the industry that I want to do some different things with. So nothing imminent, but just looking at options. So and I will just add just in case there isn't people on that are people are on that haven't been on before. I have done a lot of hardware in my career, hardware technologies from Intel and Apple Computer, and worked at Cynix for a bit. So Cynix when hardware was the king and software was, oh yeah, that stuff we sell as well. Um, right now, hardware is a king again because of memory prices and the scarcity of systems and pricing around those systems. But that's a different discussion. Um, but I really am, in the last 5-6 years, been much more tied around the software and SaaS world, which is kind of drives into this topic today in particular of interest of, what's going on in the SaaS world. It's fascinating in a bunch of different ways, both the development of it, the distribution of it, the selling and servicing of it. And in comparison to the hardware where you don't have to worry about supply, right? So you're worried more.
Yeah, that it is interesting what's happening to memory prices, right? Because I've got this, believe it or not, 2012 MacBook still kicking around my house someplace, and it's got 16 gigs of RAM, which is the same amount of memory my current laptop from just a couple years ago has, right? But here's the difference: when I press the Enter key, uploading a document into insert like AI model here, right? There's like 300 gigs of RAM, right? that are crunching on that document. And I think all the people that are complaining about memory prices, man, you have no idea how much memory those stupid little chat box are using.
Yeah, suck it up. Yeah, indeed.
Yeah.
Well, good. So anyway, that's my quick run around. So, but thanks for having us on, Matt, and really appreciate the opportunity to continue educating partners and ourselves, right? So.
Well, yeah, I mean, today's topic is really just talking about how do we get to that place of security safety, right? In this co-managed environment, right? Where there's a service provider or an outside professional services organization, and then you have the client's organization, and you're working together. You're hopefully you're in some kind of mutual responsibility matrix. You've assigned tasks, and you know who's doing what. But I'm going to tell you, I do a lot of assessments, and what I find is that while there is oftentimes a lot of split between this org's doing that org's doing that, in some cases I see an org and then a cluster of outside service providers. There's not as much coordination as there probably should be. There's a lot of redundancy, and then there's a lot of holes, right? And places where things are not communicating. So I don't know the best way to like take a bite out of like what's an immense topic, right?
Well,
But
Go ahead, Frank.
Well, I was just say I'll do it quickly, and you're more the expert on it, I think, from the software side. But I think what's most fascinating with that scenario you painted, right, is that one group has a specific need, right, and it kind of comes down to the business unit decision versus the IT decision, right, which I think continues to roll. But again, now you throw in the AI components, right, and you throw in the plethora of SaaS applications that are easy for an individual to license and buy without the oversight of somebody taking it. Now let's make sure, does that fit within, and and I'll leave that to you, Kyle, because this is what Josys does is that perspective of understanding. Yeah, there's great tools. You can have those tools, fine, Mr. Legal department or Mr. Accounting department, great. But make sure you have the broader corporate and overview on that to make sure that when that tool gets used, that's connected to that database and that's connected over here. But you forgot about this access point, which is partly what we protect. But now we've got the software access points that open up a whole new world of the isms.
Yeah, well, you're making me realize that I position that as if this, the teams that are working together are external entities, but they are not always external entities. They are separate entities, and they could be under the same umbrella. But so yeah, Kyle, tell me.
Yeah, it was an interesting point you brought up because it's actually something that I was getting into at an event that I was at where we were talking about kind of like at a very like basic level, business level, defining like responsibilities, right? Who, when you're doing co-managed, right, you got to have specific parameters of, okay, we are responsible for this. You are responsible for that. Do we put it in writing? How do we communicate this? And then to your point, Frank, talking about kind of the access piece of it, where like it becomes very important in terms of like communicating kind of who should have access to what, who should not have access to what, to make sure that you're not, leaving yourself blind in any areas, exposing yourself in any way. And so, yeah, just from like a legal perspective, from like a cybersecurity standpoint, it's a very interesting conversation. It's difficult, right? Because every single client that you have, every single entity that you're interacting with is different. They have different expectations and different needs.
Yeah, and that's a whole nother thing. You just I don't know if you realized it, but you just hinted at another humongous I would say it's a quality of delivering co-managed services, which is you have client A over here, right? You've established this best practice with that client, right? And then you got like client B, C, D, E, F, right? And how do you take that win here and bring it across? And in some cases, that means a sales cycle, right? To be able to work effectively in that way. In other cases, it's you becoming like the source of security culture, right? I'm really curious, Frank, where you see best practice in like in one organization, right? Where you see best practice in a team, and then like where have you seen it go wrong and where have you seen it go right? Where they, with the cross cultural or cross policy communication.
Well, I guess our specific angle on it, whether it's vulnerability management or even more important and more relevant is in the penetration testing, right? So, right, our services team does, baselines. They do comprehensive, and it's the best practice is to do them for one. The worst practice is to do them and not take action on what was been found in that report. We've had numerous accounts where we'll come back, oh yeah, we're doing an annual pen test. Well, we did last year. Here's, have you made any progress, right? Have you done? And we'll find 9 of the 10 things that we recommended have not been completed. Right? So, and there's lots of reasons. Could be budget, could be just access, could be timing, but again, the word, it's the simplest thing of you can't protect, you can't reduce the risk of things you don't know are there. So, the penetration testing is one way of doing that. Vulnerability, inventory assessments and sort of tracking is another way. That it's really, okay, I'll oversimplify. It's really easy, right? But it is a simple, relatively straightforward process to do. But it's another thing to do, right? And so that's usually, just the stopping points. Like, and most times it's not really a budget issue. It's just, again, it's a staffing issue at the MSP, perhaps, just to do the tasks that are identified, or, it's a cultural thing of educating the customer, right, on what they need to, they shouldn't just let anybody bring in their devices. because they have their own PC that they want to work with. Like, there are some limitations of what you can protect when you open up the kimono like that.
If I rewind a number of years, it used to be this vague concept of security best practices that people in the industry shared. Um, and I say vague because there were good security ideas and bad security ideas, and those ideas changed over time, either because people realized the research showed maybe you shouldn't be rotating passwords every 30 days because then people write them down in stupid places, right? It's better to just keep them up here.
Yeah.
Or in other cases, the world changes around you, right? But it was all a little bit slippery, right? And now what we look at is, there's standards out there, and they were always standards. They've been standards in IT security since the 1970s and 80s. But I think the standards now are flexible enough, and there's enough variety that there's a good standard for any business environment now. And there, for small organizations, for large organizations, I look at, it's a lot more methodical now. Are we doing this thing and this thing specifically that's written in the standard? Are we doing it here? Oh, we're doing it there. Are we also doing it over here? Right? It's something I look at. Or in the case of like this external entity, right, where they, you've got responsibilities on both sides to accomplish something. In some cases, things have to happen in both places, right? Like, it's great, we're doing device inventory here. Are we doing device inventory over there, right? And I think that's occupying an increasing amount of security program development these days, is normalizing. You've got this someone had a good idea. They did a good thing. Great. How do we make that thing is everywhere, right? And how do we make sure the thing stays that way, right? And a lot of that is beyond your reach because it goes to another team, right? So, how do you communicate those things? And you can do it in compliances, right? But not everyone reads compliances, right? You could do it in security awareness training, but like most people just click through to the end and hit the random multiple choice, answers.
I don't do
so there's no magic wand as far as I'm concerned, but I am interested in the other ways that you guys have seen. Hey, this good new thing is happening, and now we've successfully gotten it from here to there across this organizational boundary.
Well, I think it comes down to change management, right? I think a lot of people, a lot of the time, like especially for MSPs, you get a lot of brilliant people, a lot of good problem solvers, who can get to the solution to an issue many different ways. But the idea is to have them do it one way so you can track it and repeat it, right? So there's a little bit of like the change management aspect of like getting everyone together and kind of aligning on like a specific, not like a specific procedure, but like a specific outcome. So everyone kind of understands why we want to do it this way. What kind of the pitfalls might be if we continue to do it, in our own separate ways. And then ultimately how it will benefit them specifically. And then lastly, the business, because a lot of times like people just want to do their job, right, and then clock out. And if you're going to give me a bunch of extra steps to do something that I already know how to do, then maybe I'll have some questions. But if you can communicate that to me effectively, why we're doing it this way, then I'm more likely to understand and actually do it.
Well, I think the point you talked about there, the business outcome element, right, is again kind of comes back to, relevant all this, and particularly in the discussion with an MSP to their customer, right? They're often talking about, hey, this technology would be great for you, as opposed to, hey, you're running the business this way. You have these types of access and controls and, compliances or whatever, right? These are the things that you need to do, or you're going to be out of business just because of a lack of certification or shutdown or whatever it is, right? So it always comes back down to that. And that's the easiest way to justify an investment in your services, right? So if you're not clearly, driving that, and I think, as you said, Kyle, there's a lot of MSPs that love talking tech, right? And that's great at certain levels, but smaller the business, the less you can do that. So, but I think, kind of to our topic, Matthew, I think the value of one, understanding what's in the environment, right? And we're talking, co-managed security and co-managed between, there's probably a, I guess it's maybe two-way still, but it's the MSP to and their customer. What access does the customer have, right? And what, again, back to whether it's cultural, whether it's the awareness training they've instituted, or it's I'm almost kind of struggling with the co-managed term, right? It's kind of an all managed term, or maybe it's all managed security, all levels. Everybody needs to have that play. Now, again, small business guy probably cares less about what technology he's using, the MSP is using to protect him, but he wants to make sure it's protected. So,
I think that there's a lot of my, we're a channel organization. Most of our partners are MSPs, and some of those MSPs are in co-managed world. Some of them are in small business, fully managed world. They all have some version of this issue of, hey, well, if you want to get to this security destination, right, whatever that destination is, I can do all this amazing stuff for you. In the case of fully managed service, you have it all packaged up, right? In the case of a co-managed client environment, you'll have maybe smaller packages, maybe a menu, things you can do. But in either case, whether it's a co-managed or a fully managed environment, you really can't get to that destination without your client doing their part, right? Even if it's as simple as setting like their goal. I want to be this secure, and I'm willing to resource it to this level to reduce this amount of risk. Take care of it for me, fully managed MSP, right? In the case of co-managed service provider, it gets even more difficult, because rather than an MSP taking like their full like package, their stack that they bring to every client and they give the same spiel, right? You can have pre-cooked service delivery packages, right? But you're not going to just offer it to the client and say, here's the thing, right? You first need to get into the client and figure out, what are they already doing inside? What are they good at? What are they not good at, right? What do they need help with, right? And then you really have to do that before you can present your highly tuned, for example, vulnerability management, like mitigation service, right? Because you find out actually they're doing that right now. They're scanning right now. They're patching right now. And their results are all over the place. And what they actually need is some methodology, right? And so you can come in and you can offer that, hey, I'll bring the SLA, right? You'll be able to meet the insurer obligation on this thing, right? And you won't know that though unless you go through all their security, right? And it's sometimes they know exactly what they need, and they're gonna be like, I need this thing, and they'll draw a box around it, right? Just as frequently, or maybe more frequently, whether they draw a box or not, they really have no idea what they need, right?
No, they just, well, I mean, again, the big topic of the day, right, or the year so far, is the CMMC world, right? Oh my gosh, they've just been talking about that for you. Why do I need to worry about it now? It's like, well, do you want to continue the business you have with Department of Defense and any related businesses? But they're again, they run their business, right? They're not running the technology. So fine balance for sure.
When I look at revenue opportunities in co-managed security, I think it's really different than a fully managed package, right? In a fully managed package, you can sort of get away with, here's a product that accomplishes some core value, and what I'm adding to that is the value add of making sure that product operates in a best practice fashion, right? And oh, by the way, I do help desk, right? When you go into a co-managed environment, whether you're providing those other services or not, they may already have that taken care of, right? They may have most of your stack taken care of, and they may even already own the products. What they want from you is for you to draw a box around that exact service and define the deliverables really specifically, just like you would if you were an employee in their team, where their boss said, here's your job description, it's these bullets, right? And at the end of the year, we're going to see how you're doing, and you're either going to get a bonus or you're going to get fired. And like the reality is, when you're in co-managed security, right, like that's sort of your situation, is you have to define an SLA and really hold the line on what you're delivering. And but if you do that, you're really you're going to be delivering a lot of value, a lot more value than just selling product. Like Kyle, I guess this question's to you. I think that the space you're in is a little bit newer, and I'm curious how you're seeing service engagements, and like what are the defined lists of things that people have to do that go along with that space.
Yeah, so actually something I'm currently working on with an unnamed client is sort of coming up with co-managed SKUs for them, right? So kind of bundling in our products and their services, figuring out how we can, fold in some of our best practices in our product and then what they do best. And so I think I'm kind of in that fun mode of like sort of figuring it out right now. But I think what's really helpful is to, I guess, really get on the level with the client and understand at like a deep level what exactly they are offering, what problems they solve, what outcomes they are most competent with in delivering, and then being able to kind of marry that, right? And so I hate to say, like, it depends on the client that you're working with on the on the party. But it really does. And again, like the sort of communication piece of just so with our product specifically, it's access management. It's saying who should have what. It's mapping out who's overprivileged, who needs access, who needs theirs cut off. And so again, just like understanding where they're at now, where they want to be, kind of again drawing the box around that, and sort of figuring out what the best sort of happy path towards that is.
When I look at practices that very large organizations have put in place for this type of thing, and I'm sort of like rewinding to the days before there was product to help with this, because I think that there's increasingly great solutions to help. But there was someone needs access to something, right? And the request is either going to come from the user or their boss, or maybe it's HR during provisioning, right? And then someone has to approve of that, right? Sometimes the requester needs to not be the user, right? And then you have a separate approver. So that's maybe 3 people involved, right? And you have to workflow that. And then, like, if we just fast forward into the future, at some point in the future, you have to ask yourself, like, does this person still need to access this thing? Like, or they've moved on, they're not in that job role anymore, or do they even still work here? And so you need to close the loop on that as well. And I think best practice in industry is to do that on a regular, periodic time scale, and it might be quarterly, it might be annually, where you have this access grant and someone needs to refresh it and say, like, okay, we still want this person to have access to this thing, right? Rather than taking the privilege away when they when they get fired, right? When they leave the company. You basically you expire that access grant, right? And this is complicated. I think that it's an easy thing for me to describe, but actually there's some sophisticated workflow there, because how do you even contact those people? Like how do we know who's supposed to approve of this and who's supposed to approve of that, right? Well, the approver has changed and their job's different, So there's a lot of nuance there. And I've definitely seen that become great revenue for an access control contract, right? For a service provider to take over that job of access control and just making sure that people are able to access the things that they need to access without too much resistance, right? While also making sure that they're not, able to access things when when that due diligence hasn't happened. And I think that, whether you're looking at like ISO 27K, CMMC, SOC 2, there's real teeth in evidencing not just that there's a product that's able to pull these insights, which actually makes the job of access control so much easier, right? And it makes it possible for an MSP, for example, to actually turn this into something that they can sell. But there's really tough requirements that people are willing to value. And I think that 5-10 years ago, people didn't value this in the same way. And I think that it's worth a lot to the end client if you can provide that, and if you can provide that shared service where you're guaranteeing that they're going to meet the evidence requirements of. That is something that people will pay a lot for, and I'm sure that that's somehow connected to your bundle space. And I'm not sure, I'm not sure all the other angles, because I can, my mind's just spinning of all the other identity governance, licensing. There's a number of other areas you could bite off in that space where you're tracking what SaaS are people accessing, right, and what applications are they accessing, and how do you put some controls in place, right? And it's hard stuff. And I know it's hard because every single organization I go into struggles with it, right? I mean, they don't have tools to do it, and they don't have a service provider offering them the services they need to really take care of that. And the assessors are holding them accountable, and they're having a tough time with it right now.
Well, that's why it's really important, for us to be up to date on what's going on in the compliance environment, right? Because it's like you said, it's a very new space. Kind of like, I hate to say this, but in a way, we're kind of breaking new ground with how we handle this stuff. Because like you said, SaaS environments over the years have exploded, right? A lot of people I talk to think there's a dozen, maybe a couple dozen applications in their environment, when in reality, it's 100 or 200. And if you're not able to tell, in an audit, say, what do I actually have? Who has it? Then that's a failure right on the spot in most cases.
I'm curious if people are leveraging, do you hear in conversations that people are using this to figure out where the data lives? Because it is hard to, when you're trying to do a data inventory, which is another area that organizations everywhere are struggling with right now, because data inventories were sort of an esoteric thing 5-10 years ago, and now they're critical. Is where's your data? Can you write down where all of your data is? How do you know your data is there? How do you know that it's not leaving the places where it's supposed to be? In those places where it's supposed to be, do you have all the security you're supposed to have in those places? And central to all of that is, where is the data and what is it? And so I would imagine that a lot of people that are tracking SaaS are tracking it because they're not just looking for the access rights. They're also looking we don't even know where our stuff is. It's just out there in the cloud.
I've heard stories of entire marketing departments putting all of their collateral in a department, provision Canva license, right? And then once they're offboarded, they it's gone. The company's marketing, all their collateral is gone. So yeah, no, 100%. There's horror stories around that for sure.
Frank,
so,
yeah.
Matt, I guess I'm kind of curious back to the sort of the topic again around the co-managed versus just fully managed. I'm just wondering what other differences there are, right? That maybe Kyle you're seeing, or just that we can just sort of walk through. But I don't know. Part of it, I don't know. I'm just sort of scrambling on a Friday afternoon.
I can keep. Look, I'm at the edge of the sales front in these co-managed contracts, and so I'm always supporting the partners in that. And there's a huge difference, which is you can go to a fully managed client and you can say, here's a stack, it's got a bunch of products in it, it's going to do this business function. They're like, great, sounds good. Does that seem like it's too expensive, or does it seem like it's within range? They make the decision, done, right? In a co-managed environment, you've actually got IT buyers on the other side, right? And whether they're
buyers, right? Or
distinct, and they know how to shop for stuff. And even if you're offering a great deal, right, they consider it their job to get the best deal, right? And they're going to pressure you on price for product, right? And they're not going to want to pay a lot for product, but they will pay anytime you take work away from them, right? So if you can draw the box that includes the product and you're saying, I'm actually going to do these things beyond what the product does alongside the product that's going to enable these tasks to be done that you don't want to do because you're either lazy or you don't have enough people, which is both of those things happen, right?
I'll never say.
If you could draw a box around that, that is something that co-managed clients really value and they really will pay for, and they have a hard time shopping around for that. You can't buy people doing stuff in a catalog.
Well, that also sort of again, it's in some cases it might be a foot in the door, right? To start their business model and say, you know what, we're going to start here, and then they see more things, they have more discussions, and then, oh, by the way, we can do that for you too. So
they may end up fully managed.
Yeah, exactly.
down the line.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think the benefit there that I just kind of gleamed onto was that, like, in a co-managed environment, you have a real opportunity to actually partner, right? Because in a fully managed environment, right, they kind of just expect you to maybe do everything, and there's no real thought that goes into, if it's an MSP, like, maybe they're not fully specialized in a certain compliance language or in a compliance framework or whatever, but maybe the client just doesn't know that and just assumes that. But in a and the conversation doesn't come up until maybe like it's forced, right? And you're in like an uncomfortable position where you're like, oh, well, I just don't have this information. I don't have this data. I don't have these, this evidence trail that I needed. But in a co-managed environment, you have a real opportunity to actually partner and kind of define those things and have a more proactive sort of relationship that lasts a long time.
I have a really sad conversation every single week in this year so far about CMMC2. MSP calls me up. We got to have a great call. My client wants to get CMMC2. I'm like, great. That's like a humongous project, right? This is not an easy thing. They're like, yeah, it's a great opportunity for us. And I'm like, okay, great. That they're going to have to do a lot of work too, and you can't do it all for them, right? Because you need to do this and this and this, and the MSP says, well, I don't know anything about those things, and I can't even do that. And I'm like, yeah, your client's got to be like at the table too. Like, you can't do this for them, right? And if the MSPs that have that co-managed relationship figured out, right, are the ones that really win in those situations, right, where they're able to split up the work and have a greater whole. And it's tough because in that fully managed environment, you're right, they expect you to do everything, but it's not actually possible, right? Like, you can sell them all the products in the world, but that doesn't mean you can fingerprint and background check their employees, right? That doesn't mean many things, right? Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of benefits that come with a client that has practice on their side too. You can grow the scope, grow the engagement towards like that level of safety together. Frank, I'm curious. I know that was it a year-ish ago or maybe longer ago, Nodeware got involved in helping support some of these actual service engagements around remediation. I'm curious, how has that evolved? Like, what are the things that co-managed clients are saying yes to right now? Like, yes, I want that thing.
It's a good question. I don't know that we've heard much from usage of our. I don't think we've heard much difference, right? I mean, whether it's co-managed or fully managed, the MSPs we're dealing with are still delivering it, right? Because it's I don't know. It just fits.
They don't usually hand over the tool without the service.
Right, exactly. They don't necessarily just resell a Nodeware as an example, right? It's usually as a managed service, and that. So I mean, I'm sure there are a number of cases that way, but I don't think it's any difference. I think what we've been doing is the OS patching and remediation, and now we're actually adding this month the first rollout of our third-party software patching as well. That for software
that's got exciting
capabilities discovered, right? So it's not just a fully, quote, full patching service. It's a vulnerability patching service in software.
Yeah, this is another one of those things. It's in almost every organization I go into, almost every, not all of them. We go in and they say, and I require really good quality vulnerability data to do an assessment. And if they don't have that data, I have to help them get it. Sometimes they have it, sometimes they don't. It almost always comes up, oh, I thought we were doing that already. Like I thought that I thought we were patching everything, and I thought we were already finding vulnerabilities because their MSP sometimes has a tool. And I'm not going to blame a specific RMM vendor, but there's some RMM vendors that have patching tools that patch like Windows and 5 products. And I'm being a little hyperbolic here, but like they're not always really great at the third party patching. And they tell their clients, "Yep, we're patching everything," right? And when they say everything, they just mean that they're agents on all the machines, right? And that the client thinks that they're covered. And then I come in and I do the vulnerability scan, and I'm like, okay, you got all these things, you got these things, you got these things, like you got like 800 versions of this. Like it looks like none of this stuff's getting patched, right? And the disconnect there, it's pretty large, right? First of all, the third-party patching used to be really hard. It's getting easier these days. There's better tools for that right now. I'm really excited that Nodeware is getting in on that because I think it's going to make those tools easier to access for people. But the reality is most organizations are not doing that third-party patching, or if they are, it's a very narrow set of products that are, and there's just so much stuff that they're not seeing. And their MSPs, in some cases, they're not using a dedicated vulnerability scanner, right? They're pulling CVEs from the patch management system, and they're like, oh yeah, we got vulnerabilities, right? We're doing vulnerability scanning, but they're only picking up the missing patches for the products that they have patches for, right?
Yeah.
And which those reports better be like 0, because if you have the patch and you didn't deploy it, like what's going on?
Well, yeah. No, we've been dealing with that for a number of years. A lot of MSPs will roll it out to 2 of their 20 clients, right? And they either customer specific need or just they were willing to do it. And so the MSPs, we're finding great data. We're finding things we need to really prioritize. It's great. Let's get on it. We do it. And it says, well, why aren't you taking it to the rest of your clients? Well, they end up, we found so much that we don't have the time, right? Or we don't have resources, or they didn't really pay for it. And so kind of back to the other point you were talking about, where the customer is expecting that that's happening, whether they're doing it or not, right? Because nobody reads the fine print on a services agreement, or maybe if they do, they just see managed clients, and it's like, okay, well, you're managing everything, right? So there's a line between being clear about your deliverables, being clear with the expectations of those customers and what they're expecting to be delivered, and that, there's so much there that if you're not really keeping up with it, you're going to get buried very quickly. It's easy to fall behind.
Well, Frank, why don't we keep you on the screen here? I would love for you to give people an overview of who is Nodeware, why should we care, and if we're interested, what next?
Yeah. So Nodeware is a tool that's been around 7+ years now. It's really focused on continuous vulnerability management. And I make the distinction of continuous and management in that, compared to, maybe a vulnerability assessment that's been kind of the norm for years, where people were kind of used to that. It's a once a year, once a month kind of, I think we're looking for what we've got and we're going to work on it. Given changes between vulnerabilities being published, between AI coming in, between all other kinds of elements, what we are seeing is really critical is that you're looking and getting alerted to new vulnerabilities, in particular known exploited vulnerabilities in your systems, that you can't wait a week. You can barely wait a day, and that's what we're focused on is scanning every device and system within an enterprise whether it's on the network, whether it's a remote device, or whether it's an external IP address. That's really what we're delivering cost effectively for MSPs. Again, they'd be happy to set up a demo and discuss the differences. We generally compete against Connect Secure and Vent Tenable, kind of the two that we tend to come up against, and on a one-to-one comparison, we'll win majority of those bake-offs. A lot of it because of simplicity, ease of use to everything else. So the other piece I just wanted to add to the deliverable is sort of, we were talking before about penetration testing, right? So vulnerability management is the ongoing, kind of the continuous, the internal look at what you've got and evaluating what's there, what's risky. Penetration testing, which is we have a services group that does that at all different levels and baseline or comprehensive. The penetration test is looking from the outside, right? What would a bad guy, what would the bad hacker do? And we use this kind of the same tools, but those are more extensive and more detailed in finding out, if somebody got into here, that means they kind of died before. If they get into here, that means they're going to have access to that. When they have access to that, then they've got the whole full kimono there that is available. So that's again, just to make the distinction between a Nodeware vulnerability management and a penetration testing. There's some other comparisons I can do there as well. But anyway, love to, if somebody's more interested, go to nodeware.com and look for a demo. There's a request a demo site in there. Or you could send an email to fraimondi at igius.com.
Well, before we pass the wand to Kyle, regarding the pen tests, I'm gonna make a simple comparison. If you look at the CIS controls, right, of what you're supposed to do and the order you're supposed to do them, because the ones at the top eliminate the most risk and the ones at the bottom eliminate the least risk per dollar invested. Vulnerability management is in the first half. Okay. Penetration testing is literally the last control. It's at the bottom. They're almost not recommending it at all, but they're leaving it on the list. It's literally the last thing you're supposed to do. And they're different, right? And vulnerability management has a lot of value, right? And penetration tests sometimes have value. So with that, Kyle, tell us about Josys.
Yeah. So Josys basically the birth of Josys came out of sort of the COVID pandemic, where there was a massive acceleration of the movement to cloud just across everything. And people's SaaS environments exploded, and we basically started out as a SaaS management platform, gave everyone visibility and inventory into what they all have, and it has evolved into an identity governance platform, where essentially now you're saying, here's what we have, here's who has it, should they have it, why or why not, are there any deviations from that, and then can we use automation to remediate whether someone joins, giving them access to the SaaS they need on day one, or someone leaves the organization, flipping a switch and revoking them so that they can't come back in and compromise you, right? A lot of the organizations we work with, I work with, MSPs, are in the sort of SMB and mid-market, where a lot of that SaaS, there's a ton of chaos. It's a very mixed bag of whether or not they have standard operating procedures around IGA, just because, as you said earlier, it's a pretty relatively new sort of concept. And so a lot of that is kind of going, okay, like, talk to me about your partners, your clients. Like, do they have these operating procedures in place? If yes, great. We can codify them into the platform and enforce them with automation, add an extra layer of visibility on top of their current IDP, so that they're not just seeing what IT provisions, but also, what other departments are downloading and, distributing licenses to, and kind of to the point where, like, just understanding what you have so that you have an idea of where your data might live. So you don't lose it when one person leaves the company. And then the other part is those organizations that maybe don't have those standard operating procedures in place about who should have what, giving them the ability to make recommendations as to, okay, maybe we can work together to structure those. so that we can give you some structure and some standardization, and ultimately be able to provide a little bit more operational efficiency, reduce some errors in that provisioning and deprovisioning of access, and ultimately reduce risk by taking a lot of the human element out of that. And if you want to learn more, you can go to josys.com, fill out your information for a demo, or just reach out to me, kyle.b@josys.com.
Well, thanks for joining. Yeah, go ahead.
Matt, I will just bring up one thing I think that we didn't talk too much about, but I think I've been working with Kyle and his teams on this position, because I think kind of this combination of the Nodeware, the vulnerability management in general, but Nodeware, of course, is the best one of them. So yeah, I'll reference Nodeware. But the Nodeware and the Josys combination, right? If we look back to like the cyber hygiene concept, right? Or, really truly continuously proactive management of the environment, right? These two tools together really are in my opinion, the must do, right? You got to know what hardware you have. You got to know what risks there are in that hardware. You got to know what software is being used in the environment, and you got to be able to protect that and manage that, as Kyle's talked about. So, this combination is really, again, whether it's co-managed or fully managed, this is the right kind of security that people need to be thinking about to minimize the risk, right? You're not going to eliminate it. There's always going to be the risk, but if you know your systems, what's risky, what you need to do, what your prioritizations are with those, the software is being used and what's being used legitimately, or what's being used randomly by Joe Blow in marketing that decided he wants this cool tool and he didn't make any complications. So anyway, that's kind of, I think, our joint statement. And we actually have a little page here, a flyer that I'd be happy to send out to people.
I want a copy.
Yeah. So if people want to send it out or wanted to look at it, let one of us know and we'd be happy to send it out to you. But I think it's a really powerful combination of solutions that people should be looking at a little bit more closely.
Good 1-2 punch.
Yep. Well, thanks for joining, guys.
Yeah,
we're almost at weekend for us here on the East Coast. Frank, good luck with the rest of your day.
Yeah, thank you, sir. I've got some sunshine in my future though, so it's okay.
Yeah, I'm in gray New York weather.
No, I'm temporary. I'm for the week down in Palm Springs, where it's going to be the hottest day in March in the U.S.
I heard you guys have a heat wave down there right now, right?
109 today or something.
In March. Yeah. I am sorry, I'm laughing. It's not funny. It's tragedy, actually. It's a rolling train wreck. But with all the missing rain, like over the winter too.
We'll give you some of that up in Seattle. You can have ours.
Yeah.
All right, Kyle. Well, you have another few hours in your day too, but I'm off to my weekend. Thanks, guys.
Enjoy it. Appreciate it.